we got a lot of stuff to cover. This session usually takes me between 12 to 27 hours to get through. So we're going to try and cover a lot in about 2 hours. See, this is a carbon copy of the LCD feed. So this is what the operators see. So we can see menus on here. We can see the home screen. Once we get into menus, we can start. All these shows were shot with Varicam or EVA1. Orange is New Black, the OA, Ozarks, Crazy Rich Asians, Love, one of my favorites. Frontier is actually shooting right now, 13 Reasons Why. So we've got a ton of shows out there shooting Varicam and EVA1. As we've seen, as Pete mentioned, color imagery wise, the EVA1 and the Varicams match almost 100% across the board. It's V-Log and V-Gamut. So you get the same color imagery. Dual native ISO on both cameras, 800 or 2500 on the EVA1, 800 or 5000 on the LT, and I'll get into how we do that in a second. 2 new shows for us, Crazy Rich Asians, 6th best romantic comedy of all time according to Box Office Mojo. Huge show for us. And Letterman jumped onto this recently. Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. Lots of reality shows, some that are in production right now that I can't talk about, but keep an eye on, I didn't make this slide, by the way. So it's, EVA1 is essentially a mini Varicam. 5.7K sensor, we oversample to get 4K out of it. 422 10-bit in camera, up to 400 megabits, which is super high speed for a camera this size, and we'll get into media and the ins and outs of that. So yeah, SD card recording, we use V90s to get the 400 megabit. EF or PL mount, we've got both here today. Wooden Camera did a PL mount option. Infrared cut filters removable at the touch of a button, which is really, really nice. We've done a specific piece called Palette that's on our Vimeo page. You can go check that out and how we did it. Up to 240 frames if you want to get there. New for us is 60 in 4K. That's the brand new firmware upgrade version 3.0. A raw output, full 5.7K to Atomos Shogun or Sumo. Once your autofocus, image stabilization, it goes on and on and on. Full size timecode in or out, HDMI out, SDI out simultaneously. One thing about Panasonic, and you'll find this with a lot of manufacturers if you buy a camera body for X dollars. Oh, you wanted to do high speed? Oh, that's a license fee. You want to do raw? That's a license fee. Everything included here. We don't charge for license fees. We do firmware upgrades every 3 months. As a matter of course, it's either functionality or a bug fix or whatever the case may be. But I don't think if you're spending this kind of money on a camera system that you should be charged for a firmware upgrade on top of it or a license on top of it. It just seems unfair. So the full range of the Cinema series by Panasonic's 5 cameras, the GH5S by Lumix, the EVA1, the LT, 4K 422, they got up to 240 frames a second. Varicam 35, 4K 444, the original of the new Varicam series, and of course the Pure, which is 12-bit uncompressed RAW. So you got pretty much any kind of horsepower you want, but the nice thing is the color imagery is the same across the board. The LT, the 35, and the Pure all use the same sensor, so they can be intercut, and they have been on numerous shows. We've seen Varicam Pure cut with EVA1. There's a piece called Foster Boy that we hope to see release at any point in time. Very soon, we'll actually intercut 4K 12-bit uncompressed RAW off the Pure and the EVA1 together, and I can't tell the difference, to be honest with you. If side by side, you may, but they're so close together color imagery-wise, it's really, really tough to tell. Same V-Log, same gamut. Again, sorry I didn't make this one. But here, the kids are into this these days. Super 35 sensor, 5.7K, dual native ISO. We've spoken about that a little bit. Basically what that means is it gives us the option of having 2 film stocks embedded into the camera system. Essentially 2 film stocks built into the camera. Most camera systems these days have a base ISO of 800 with a few exceptions. For those back in the day that used to deal with film, it was 250 on a good day, 320 sometimes. Yeah, those are the dark days, literally. At the flip of a switch, I can change from 800 to 2500. So I've added, over a stop and a half worth of gain for no noise reduction, or a stop and a half of exposure of it with no noise reduction. And how we get there is part of the global shutter, the rolling shutter that we have, there's lots of back and forth. Why global versus rolling? It takes a lot more processing to be able to process a global shutter system. It adds noise inherently, which is the last thing we want to be doing at those high ISOs. Jello cam and the skew problems from earlier manufacturers is completely gone now. Sensor technology and the refresh rates have got much, much better. So we don't deal with those kind of technology issues on the back end. There's our film stock quote. So on the EVA1, I can start at my native ISO of 800, and I've got some latitude to play up or down. So I can go from 200 on the low end up to 2000. So it gives me room to play there. As Pete mentioned, he's going to be, on the 2500 side, he'll drop down to 1600. We see, some people would go down to 1250 or 1000. Perfectly ideal. But having a 2500 as a base is a really, really nice thing. When you start to drift away from these, though, you do start to shift from the native ISOs or the native dynamic range of the camera, which is 15 stops. So you will lose, if you go from 800 to 400, you're going to lose a stop of exposure or a stop of dynamic range at that point. So the traditional cameras on the top, your other the German guys or the other Japanese manufacturers, this is how they do it. Until recently, we were the first ones to do this. 800 is on a separate circuit, a separate analog circuit over 2500. So literally, if you flip the switch, we're not adding gain and noise reduction to get to 2500. That is constantly flagged to us while you're cheating and it's not real. It's a completely separate analog circuit. And it can be done literally at the touch of a button. So we'll get into that in a second. This is a piece, Frank Prinzi shot this in New York. Mixed lighting in a scene. This is just available light, by the way, there's nothing else in this frame. So you've got the LEDs on the Empire State Building, you've got the halogens off of the van coming towards you. You've got sodium vapor, you've got all kinds of different mixed lighting in this scene. Ridiculously dark, detail, skin tones, and overall mixed lighting in a scene is amazing. Anyone who's used Panasonic cameras in the past knows the pedigree we've come from and how good skin tones have been, how good the colorimetry is out of the box. Not necessarily just for night shooting, as we've seen, you get to higher f-stop if you need to do it, save setup time, and of course, for the producers here, you can shoot longer and ideally save money. So we've got different setup modes in the sensor itself to be able to get to those higher frame rates. As I mentioned, it's a 5.7K sensor that we oversample to be able to get our 4K image out of it. And then we can go down to our 4:3 crop mode to get to 240 frames in 1080 if we want to do that. More of this, up to 240 frames on a camera that's of this size and weight. And the colorimetry again I think is second to none. In NAB, we do a specific darkroom test. We're dealing with about a foot candle, 1.5 foot candles. And it's really, really tough to see that there's actually a model in our darkroom set. It's a completely black set with a black couch and an African-American model in a black suit in about 1.5 foot candles. And the detail that we can get is absolutely amazing. The skin tones, the lack of noise at 5,000, it's absolutely stunning to be seen. As I mentioned, Vlog is our standard gamma curve built into the camera. We have different options for different kind of scene files. EV1 look is kind of a center-live look to it, so it's essentially kind of like a 709-ish option. Then you've got BC look 3 and 4, which are more broadcast, and then scene 5 is an HDR live option, and we'll get into that in a minute. So you don't necessarily have to shoot Vlog and then go to add your light in post. You can do that if you want. If you don't necessarily have enough time to be able to go through that process, you can bake in a look-in camera if you need to do it. In GH4 and 5, you've got Vlog Lite or Vlog L in that as a standard gamma curve. That's an add-on package for the GH5. They're very similar across the board, but you may find some tweaks. Bill Wages uses a GH4 and an LT. Anyone seen Sun Records? Go check that out. There's a lot of stuff in there that is mixing a GH4 and an LT. So colorimetry-wise, they're extremely close. But again, you've got what you're going to remember is there's in between the GH4 and the EVA1 there is a different sensor in there,
Right.
but it's a slightly different colorimetry.
Different curve in the knee.
Different curve in the knee. Yeah. You can really start to dig into this if you want. In camera, you can make matrix and color correction changes. Our recommendation across the board, though, is to get the full dynamic range, you're shooting V-Log. As you start to come in here, you're going to start to affect different areas of the areas of color correction. So be very, conscious of what you want to do and make sure that, because once you've baked it in, you can't undo this process. A few things we added to try and speed things up are what we call quick switch. So at the touch of a button, you can come in and set 2398 at 4K, and then I want to do HD at 240 frames. Very, very quickly, you can come in and change those scene files and reboot the body in, I think it's about 12 to 13 seconds, somewhere in there, for a full reboot, including frame rate. So just try and make the camera more and more user-friendly as we go. We added lookup tables. We've got a free lookup table library on our website. So you can dig around and find 35 different lookup tables. If you want to do a legal version, EDL cube options for a lightbox downstream. So you can monitor on set and then take your extended version and see, and then bake that in post and their exact carbon copy. On the LTE and the 35 and the Pure, you can actually do that on an SD card and record one at a time, so you have viewing lots in camera. Internal NDs built into the body, 0.61, 0.21, 0.8, so you've got 2, 4, and 6 stop NDs built in. That's a motorized option that you can control remotely with an app. We've added an app to the App Store, completely free app, and a Wi-Fi dongle that plugs into the back of the body that gives you the option to be able to remotely control camera. So that's nice. Electronically in the camera, you can remove the IR cut filter. So at the touch of a button, you can swing that out. Again, Palette is the promo video we made for that. It's available online. If you want to dig around in this a little bit more, you can preset this to a hotkey. There are options on, there's a website called Petapixel that is a really good place, or LifePixel is a really good place to be able to find information about how you shoot different kinds of infrared, the different types of filter you add on the front, depends which nanometer you need to be at for the different color look. We want to make sure we were up to spec on lenses. Communication-wise, right now we're looking at one of the Sigma Cinema series here. So we've got the focal length, distance, and T-stop plugged in. So all that metadata runs through. And if it's a full version, if it's a full EF style lens you've got on the side of the body, you've got iris control, which can also be controlled remotely on the app too. So having all these manufacturers in place, all of these lenses have been pre-checked and signed off by us. You can find all this stuff on our website, or if you want, I can email this to you after the fact. Image stabilization is built into the camera, or you've got the option, depending on what style of lens it is, to have it in the lens. Ideally, we don't want both on at the same time, because they will start to interfere with each other, and you do get in some cases, depending on the manufacturer, a jello effect to it. So just be conscious of one or the other. Not all image stabilization is created equally, so pick and choose carefully.
So sorry, you don't recommend combining the IS and the lens with the body?
Not on at the same time.
Because they might not be.
Yeah, one or the other. It's usually the better way to do it. But test it, because you may find the lens works better than the camera or vice versa. LCD panel, as we discussed, not for everyone's taste. For indoor work, I think it's absolutely acceptable. If you boost the power and add the shade when you're in exteriors, it can work really, really nicely. What's awesome is it's actually a touchscreen. Also acts as a touchscreen, so I can go in the home here, literally, and I can touch the screen and then start making adjustments on the fly. I've also got control on the scroll wheel on the side of the camera, and the iris wheel on the hand grip too. Will also allow me to make these changes. So you got lots of ways you can control the camera, and again, you got the app as well if you want to do it. Cool. So these are the 6 main use functions that we're looking at right now: frame rate, colorimetry. If I want to change my V-Log setting, my colorimetry, for example, I can come in here, and these are the different looks I can bake in. pretty simple. On my outputs, I can change to a Vlog or 709. Easy to do. This can be preset to a hotkey as well. Hotkeys are really, really going to save time. Focus squares, Vlog to 709 through the SDI. Infrared, you've got 9 different hotkeys that you can plug things in. We'll get into that in a minute. All your information here, pretty clear and simple on how you can, your resolution, your codec that you're currently at, how much time you got left on media, if we're connected Wi-Fi, battery, so on and so on. And of course, these are my SDI out, all my outputs, so we can see what we're seeing, Vlog or 709 out of those two. Pretty simple. Again, on a touchscreen too. Our main menu would take us, if we hit the home button, will take us here. And then we use the scroll wheel on the side. But you could, again, use the touchscreen as well if you want. It's really, really simple. I know menus, systems, menu structure has always been a bone of contention for a lot of people. You obviously have to have a camera that you can use quickly and is simple to use. We've tried to make, over time, Panasonic menus have been really, really simple. For those of you who've met me in my previous life, I was over at Panavision for about 26 years. Luckily enough to have seen almost every digital camera come and go, from the F900 all the way through to anything that Red's put out. I mean, every single digital camera. I like these menus over anything else, personally. It's my personal favorite. Really, really simple to deal with. Cool. This is the app. We do recommend that it's done over an iPad and not necessarily a phone, because there is a lot of detail on that screen. Once we're done here and you get your hands on it, I will, we can fire up the app and you can actually get control over it. I'm just going to hold it. So you can either do using the Wi-Fi dongle I just showed you earlier, you can do Wi-Fi there, but obviously if you're in the middle of Warner Brothers and you've got 17 different stages around you and each PA's got 2 phones and an iPad, there is only so much bandwidth in that 0.4 or 5 gigahertz range. There are times you may want to go hardwire. You can do that with 2 different adapters that are currently available on the market right now. So you can plug directly into an iPad. Standard Ethernet adapters. So as I mentioned, user buttons or hotkeys. So user switch 1, 2, and 3, you can pre-assign these to do different things. User switch 4 is by default set to image stabilization. 5 is set to waveform. That's SDI or the viewfinder output. 6 is usually set to auto white balance. And we'll get into that in a minute. You've got this user toggle down here as well on the side of the body, which is a 3-function option. White balance, a user setup that's usually set for audio monitoring, and ISO. So you click the switch there, and then once you've found out which one you want, then you roll the scroll wheel to adjust through those. So easy to do. Basic audio controls on the outside of the body. If you want to get into more, there are obviously a full audio menu in camera, and then the main power switch. You can lock all this stuff out. If you're using handheld, you've got hotkeys up against someone's face that can run the camera, or changing these hotkeys, you can lock everything out really easily. Cool. Record up. So I've got one on the side of the hand control here as well, red button here. We'll get into that in a minute. NDs 0.6, 1.2, 1.8. Iris wheel, you push in for automatic, push again to turn it back into manual, and then scroll up or down. Again, this is only current on full EF style lenses. Front of the camera, you've got the lens release and then the toggle switch here for your different setups. Thumbnail does playback. We'll get into that in a minute. Home button brings us to our Varicam style menu screen here. And this essentially matches what the Varicam does. Right now I've got a Sigma on here. This is the cinema version on this camera. Sorry, I don't have actually any on any of these, the full EF versions. But it has to be a motorized EF style lens. These are the cinema style EF mounts, which have got manual iris on it. And obviously that won't interact with the iris wheel here. It needs to be a full EF motorized version. Yeah. Yeah. This one will put out, this actually puts out data, but it doesn't give you the option of a manual iris control. It's auto. It's auto iris control. It's full manual on the lens itself. Hand grip is removable and adjustable. Against once you come on up here, you can take a look at it. It's a single LANC connector that controls all these different functions. You've got, on the side of the hand grip, you've got an iris control wheel that also acts as menu, and which is 8 and 9, and a record button and a menu button. And then you can rotate that to fit if you need to. We've made third-party accessories that give us option to move that away. This setup here, we've pulled the hand grip off and put it on a side grip so it's a little more user-friendly. And then the LANC cable plugs back into the body. Each user switch gives us the option of having all these different functions plugged into it. So variable frame rate is new. The quick switch or quick load for different setups is new. So all this stuff we've added. Some really useful stuff. And this is going to save you a lot of time on set, having this stuff pre-programmed into hotkeys. Cool. As I mentioned, the toggle switch does different things. So the white balance option, if I go here, come back to a live screen. So if I'm in white balance, I can scroll through the different presets. So here's my options. So I can scroll through here, and I've got 32, 43, 56, and 63 are pre-programmed into the body. And then you have the option of 2 automatics, so A or B. And you can come in and just hit auto on the front. If you're in a preset right now and I try and change my white balance, that's the warning you get is invalid, because I'm trying to change a preset, not an automatic. Does that make sense? Okay, so if I come in here, depending on how we are. Okay, so 56 plus or minus 5.5 on the green and magenta scale. So that's how fast it is to do white balance. You're not back in the days of old studio cameras where 70% of the frame had to be filled with white. We've got much, much better. 0.6, bottom right hand corner of the frame, 1.8. So you go up, hit the end of 1.8, and then come down. Yeah, it's 2 buttons, up and down. You can't cycle around. You have to go up to 1.8 and then back down again. With the Varicam, it's on a manual wheel, so you just literally turn the wheel as you go. This is full electronic, and again, you can function that off the app remotely, which is really nice. You can do auto white balance. You can add presets in the menu, so I won't dig into this too much because, I want you to get your hands on this camera. You come in and change your presets for white balance just by scrolling through. Again, you've got the option of doing it on the scroll wheel on the side of the body. Cool. There's the back end of the body, which is nice. So USB 2.0, this is where our Wi-Fi dongle plugs in, or you can plug your Ethernet adapter in there. HDMI 2.0 will kick out 4K or 1080 and up to 60p and 422. 2 SD card slots, you can do different functions with those. You can go a simultaneous record, so it's a carbon copy on both cards. Or you can go from one to the other, which is the relay version. User switch 7 is a slot select to go from slot 1 to slot 2. Pretty simple. Headphone jack, 2 audio channels, 60 SDI, which also supports the 5.7K raw output or 4K raw output. Time code in or out. Anyone that has used bodies of this size knows that you're always into chintzy adapters. We didn't want to do that. We wanted a full-size time code option using SDI, so you can use pro-level sync boxes for it. DC in, it's the same camera of a DC option. It's the same power supply that runs the battery chargers, the dual bay battery charger. And there are options from adapter cables that can go straight into Anton Bauer battery backs on PTAP. So we'll get into battery life, which is ridiculous for these batteries. The largest one we have internally is about 5.5 hours. If you add an Anton Bauer onto this, it's like 6.5 days. So it's a camera that uses almost zero power internally. It's yeah. For this, the battery size is ridiculous. So yeah, we've got, this is the mid size, and it's over 3 hours. And this is an existing battery. Anyone recognize these from the DBXs? Yep. So yeah. So it's nice that we kept some stuff from the old camera, so you don't have to go out and buy all new batteries and accessories for everything else. So. The SDI out, the single SDI is super powerful. You've got all these different options for outputs. It's really, really easy to change those. Right now I've got my output settings, which are down here. Oops, back up one. Output settings. My SDI out can do different things. I can change it to do a full SDI, and from there the output format can be changed. Right now it's mirroring what the LCD is seeing, just so we can see menus. But I can change that to do all these different options really, really quickly. Again, what we're looking at right now is the mirrored option. So you can see all the functions that are on the LCD out. You may find this connector looks like someone else's connector. This looks very, very similar to a Sony connector. Please don't plug Sony monitors into this camera. Please. Someone did it and bricked it.
Do you have an extender, like an extension cable for that one? So you could move your monitor.
Well, you do have the, I mean, it's a good sized cable anyway. I've got it on the cable pinch right now. So you've got the option to be able to move around a little ways anyway. But obviously, because there's so much coming through here, a video signal plus all those menu structures, so, you know, it's an 18-inch cable. No, there's no extensions for it. But, you do have the option, obviously this is the LCD panel as I remove it from the Zacuto box. So you can mount this anywhere you want. We've got the adapter that is a 1/4-20 slot, so you can pull that back here and mount it directly here if you want to do it. So you got some functionality to play around. So it can be put in various different places. So if you're on a gimbal, for example, you've got the option of plugging it in here, and then you've got all this room to be able to play to mount it to the gimbal, again on a 1/4-20 mount. So it's pretty simple. We mentioned focus tools earlier. This is built into the Varicams as a matter of course. Focus squares. It's a large. Anyone seen focus squares before? Raise your hand if you've seen this. This was originally created by our factory group, and it came from the GH5 and is now embedded into all the Varicams, the EVA1, and most of our studio cameras as well. It really is a nice function. Let's see, we've got this. All right, squares. And I've got this, let's see if I've got this on a hotkey. So this is all my user switches where they're all set to. So there's focus squares on user switch 2. So as a rack focus in or out. You want to be my lovely model? Oh, I didn't mention, I've got some other Panasonic people with me today. This is Rob, one of our SSE, our service engineer. He fixes all the mistakes I make. Neil Matsumoto checked you in. Neil is our marketing genius for the West Coast. He does most of my work as well. Steve Slade, again, is our sales rep for the West Coast. He fixes my other mistakes. So, and of course, our awesome team from Hot Rod Camera and our friends at Indie Shooter for recording me today. Please don't put this on Facebook. As I rack through this, you'll see, as I hit Rob, the larger the square, the more in focus that point is. And if I come in here and try and hit my hand, you'll see it pop to my hand as well. You see how fast that is to roll through? And it's not just on or off, it gives you kind of a rolling sequence as I rack in and out. You'll see the depth there. So it may take some getting used to. We've also got a peaking option. Looks very similar to false color in some ways, but it's just pure red. You can actually change the color to green or white or red if you want to leave it there. So that's focus squares, and that's proprietary to us. I don't know if anyone else has done this. In fact, I'm sure that they haven't. This is Panasonic only. Nice touch. Come play with it when we're done here. Punch in, we got expand 2, 3, and 4 times to the finder. Again, I mentioned peaking. You see on the bottom photo, the subject's hair is lining up red when they're in focus. You can change colors there, red, green, or white. Some nice stuff for exposure that's built in. In the middle of the crosshair, you can add a spot meter in the Varicams. Anyone use Varicam? Spot meter Varicam. It's actually called YGET. Thank you to our factory for naming that. Y meaning luminance, meaning light. So YGET instead of get Y or spot meter. Anyway. Japanese naming convention. So in the EVA1, it's actually called spot meter. Thank God. In the middle of the crosshair, you can turn that on a hotkey as well. So you actually get a spot meter in the middle of frame on over 18% gray in either stops or percentage. Nice to have. You've got zebra options, and again, we can punch in a waveform in the middle of the finder if you want. Actually appears in the bottom right-hand corner. Cool. Symbol indicators on the side of the, I don't have any frame lines marked in here. I do have a level gauge. You see it on the outside of the frame. As I tilt back and forth or rotate the camera, you'll see that change. That's new for us. We haven't done that before. Safety markers, center squares, you can change those. You can customize all your frame lines to do all these different functions. Lots of stuff. And then there's a preset series as well. So different colors, different things. Double slot features for the SD cards. We'll get into SD cards in a minute on the versions we recommend and why we recommend them and which ones you need to do which resolution. So you got a slot function on or off, so one will run out and then you switch to slot 2. Relay will go from one to the other. If you've got formatted cards, in theory you can shoot forever. It's cool. So if you're shooting a concert that's going to run for so many hours, you can literally get formatted cards and go from slot 1. When slot 1 runs out, it automatically goes to slot 2 and then so on, reload slot 1, and you can in theory go forever as long as you've got battery power. Simultaneous recording does a carbon copy on slot 1 and slot 2, so it's a backup. We have seen it's a really simple process to format media. We have seen cards get physically damaged because you're dealing with SD cards. They are obviously incredibly light and thin. Anyone put one of these through the laundry? Compact flash cards love it, by the way. I've drowned several of those. We have seen cards get mishandled and cracked because it's wafer thin plastic. You have to be very, very careful. Please be very, very careful. Formatting cards is really easy to do. It does give you some warnings. So you go to record settings, cards and media. This is my 2-slot function, by the way. That's how I get to that. So I'm going from one card to the next, relay recording. Cards and media, format 1. Set, scroll up until it highlights yellow. Finished. So it does give you warnings, so you can't do it by accident. There is a way to be able to recover this. It's a third-party option that's card recovery. Here's the media. So V90s are the recommended speed rating for these. So it's SDXC V90. And that's recommended for the 400 megabit option. If you're going to be shooting 1080, you can get away with the V30s. That's totally okay. We don't necessarily recommend third-party media. So V90s, we do recommend for the 400 megabit, and you can step down from there. But diligent testing is required. Don't go buy 400 cards off of eBay or Amazon expecting them to work. Buy one, test it. Make sure you test with these cards. So I'm just going to record a couple of random clips here. This is really nice to do.
Pop a new battery in there first.
Yeah, let's do one more. Okay. So we'll cut this and do another one, and I'll walk you through the thumbnail. Really easy to do. So rack some focus, get some zoom. Cool. I'm going to replace the battery. We're almost dead here. Thank you. Thank you very much. It is toasty warm. So, digital cameras from back in the day, remember the boot times, how long they used to be? Yeah, inherently long. It's like, yeah, all right, that's 2.5 to 3 minutes in some cases, depending on the model. So, count with me. There's the power switch. Yeah, so with DSLR speeds on boot up with this camera, and they're recording in less than, I don't know, 10 seconds. So speed is of the essence today. We want to make sure that you're up and down as quickly as possible. Changing batteries makes it really, really easy. Varicams are the same way. From boot time to SDI out or video out on all outputs is 3 seconds. Boot time to recording on this camera is less than 10. So really, really fast. Thumbnail, this will do our playback options. So these are the ones I goofed around with earlier. This was from a previous shoot. So push it in, when you highlight the option you want, push in on it, and then run the playback. So pretty simple. If you want to do it, you've also got on the right hand side, you can do a frame grab. So on the touch screen, I can do a frame grab. So literally just push the, so I've now got all those backed up in the thumbnail folder as well. Anyone use Macs for their downloads? Everyone use the write protect switch on their media? Yeah, anyone not use the write protect switch on their media? Please start using it. Inherently, PCs don't necessarily suffer from this, but Macs, when they see an SD card or a thumb drive or pretty much anything that's plugged in, oh, awesome, let's write some trash files on top of it. You have to make sure that you put the lock switch on the side. Same goes with Varicam. On the base of the card, there's a little slot record prohibit switch. You can still offload from the laptop, but you can't write to it. If you've got a full card, a full 5, or in this case, a 64, it's completely at capacity, and then the Mac sees it and starts overriding stuff, it may start to degrade data and overwrite what you've already put on there. So please make sure you use your write protect switches. And the good thing is I'm going to leave this lock on and then try and record, and it's not going to like it. WP, write protect. So it won't let me record unless I change slots or undo the card. So it does give you a heads up as if it's in place. And again, as I mentioned before, these are incredibly thin cards now. They're super lightweight and are prone to damage if mishandled. Make sure you have a decent storage case for it, please. That it's $6 off Amazon for one of these, and what it's going to save you in headache or having to reshoot stuff. Offloading options, you can either drag and drop or use Shotput Pro, Silver Stack, both really, really good options. Media players, VLC is really nice. If you get into the 400 megabit world and you download DaVinci, you do need the full version, the paid version of DaVinci to be able to use the full, review and offload the 4K images. Okay. The only one we haven't got up to speed yet on the new firmware is Avid. We're really close. We work directly with the NLEs to get this stuff up and running. So across the board, we're completely covered on every NLE you want. Cool. Raw recording options on the outputs. The Shogun Inferno or the Sumo 19, both of which we have here today. The Sumo 19 is really nice, by the way, a low cost 19-inch HDR option. Really, really nice. I have to say I like that one. ProRes RAW, Cinema DNG. So you got different flavors if you want it, depending on the format you go to. Anyone use RAW recorders out of my Shogun? Yeah, okay. So again, as I mentioned before, that license is pre-built into the body on the firmware upgrade. There's no additional fee for this. Just make sure your firmware upgrade is done on your recorders.
Which recorder did you say you especially liked?
I like that for as cost effective as it is, the Sumo 19. I like it. It's HDR compared to some that are in the high tens of thousands. This is $2,000, I think it is, somewhere in there. Yeah, it's a built-in recorder, so it's, yeah. Cool. Make sure your firmware is up to date on your Shoguns or Sumos before you start recording, and version 3.0. We actually did 2.5, gave us the raw option, but now we're up to version 3 as of last week. If you're using multiple cameras, you can save a setup file. So if you want to match what the settings on camera 1, so 2398, with this frame line setup, with this, particular set of hotkeys, you can save those to an SD card. So the setup file is identical across the board, name it, whatever you want to call it, and then recall it. The quick switch option is really nice. So you have the option of loading a setup file for, UHD 400 or a UHD 60 or a high speed or a crop or a 240, whatever you want to do, you can recall these really, really quickly. So it saves boot time and having to go menu page by page, or I need to drop my resolution, I need to change my codec, I need to change all these different functions. You can now do that on a single touch. That really speeds things up. That was based on feedback, user feedback, by the way. So if you have questions, concerns, let one of us know. If you have feedback about your experiences with Varicam or EVA, the only way we can make the cameras better is from your feedback. A lot of the functionality that we've introduced is based on user feedback. There are so many different camera choices out there in the world that we have to be, keeping up with the Joneses. There's a lot of competition in the market. And the best thing about being a manufacturer is getting the feedback from you guys. But the people that benefit are you, because you've got Sony constantly updating their software. You've got Canon, you've got us, and we're all trying to, keep up with the Joneses and make our cameras easy to use, better image quality, low light performance. All right, so we're gonna go through a couple of things here we discussed. What's wrong with this setting? Yeah, so if I go 800 up, I'm gonna add noise. So right now I'm gonna start at 25, oh, there we go, sorry. 2500 is my base. As I start to increase, I'm gonna go up to 25,000. So ideally, if you want to get to 2,000, you would start at the 2500 side and come down. Same way with the Varicam. So the slide we had earlier with the film stock and the 2 sliding scales. So if I want to get from, and we can show this on the Varicam in particular, if I want to get to 4,000 ISO, I wouldn't go up from 800 because that's going to add a ton of gain and then noise on top of that. I'd start at the 5,000 side and come down. That's the way you get to that base setting. Or in this case, start at 2,500 and come down. Cool? What's going on here? Variable frame rate. This happens a lot. So I'm in 60 and I can't record audio. What you also need to be careful of in certain cases, you can still have video set for 2398 and still be in variable frame rate. So you'll immediately get a red flag in the middle of the screen, the exclamation point, the note with the red circle through it, so you're not recording audio at that point. Camera's smart enough to give you a heads up. Hey, you're not recording audio here because you're in variable frame rate. Make sure your time code's set the right way too, because that can be another option. So time code set for in or out, make sure it's set for in. You can come in here to the audio menus or the time code menus and figure that out there. Can't record audio, what should you do? In variable frame rate, make sure the audio settings are set correctly and confirm the audio source. We get a lot of issues with bad inputs, shotgun mics that don't work, dead cables. All right, we're shooting for cinema. What have we done wrong here? That's one. That's a possibility of one. We actually had this the other day. But there's one more obvious one than that. Scene file, exactly. So we ideally want to be in Vlog if we're shooting for cinema. So we get a full dynamic range, a full color imagery across the board, shooting Vlog. If we're shooting scene 1 where, we're essentially adding a baked-in LUT, and that's not giving us the full dynamic range. More of a gotcha on inputs and outputs. I have no picture. Make sure your output settings are set correctly. You can come in, as I mentioned before, you can come in here and you can really change output settings in a big way. So you've got too much caffeine today. So my SDI output, I can come in here and change all my different settings, including the LCD, the output format. If I do this, I'm going to kill the panel. It's all gone dead. So my output settings, it's tricky to see, but I've got 4K, 1080p, or 1080p SF. So this is freaking out on me, because it doesn't like the signal. So just be conscious of how powerful this camera is on its outputs and what you can do, what it's capable of, because it may not just be a bad cable, it may just be a menu setting. Though if you are in RAW mode, and this is a big one, there is no proxy recording in this camera like there is on the LT and the Varicams. It's in camera only or RAW only. So if I want to do the Shogun, it locks out my internal recording. So I'm only getting recording on the Shogun. It'll still output an SDI video feed, an HDMI feed simultaneously, but it won't let me record in camera at the same time. So one or the other. But yeah, you can get simultaneous feeds out of everything. Rolling shutters versus global shutters have been a question since the dawn of digital cameras. And you know, if you've seen, be careful how I phrase this because this is going on YouTube. There are certain manufacturers that believe that that's the only way to go. A global shutter is the only way to go because it stops the jello cam effect or the skew effect that you used to get. Sensor technology improved drastically over the past 8 to 10 years. So we're not really into that skew issue or the jello cam issue we got before. Processing global shutters does add noise, and it's processing down in the camera. And again, kind of like the LCD, we wanted to make a better camera as opposed to, you know, an accessory. So we put in rolling shutter, processes the images faster and gives us a quieter noise floor. You can come into the LCD power setting and then increase the power and then use this LCD shade. Or we've got these options. Zacuto Z Finder is essentially a focus loop you add directly on top of our panel, and it's really cost effective. It's a nice way to do it. And still allows the touchscreen function to be used at the same time. It's literally just,
Yeah, it just flips up.
flips up. You've still got access to the touchscreen. So, and a full focus loop.
It's a really nice loop.
And it's a really good cost-effective way to do it. Oh, this is the good one. This is my favorite. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here on my hotkey. And this is one of the things that, you know, we've really tried to keep an eye on here. So user switch 1 is now set for infrared mode. So what I've done is electronically, I've swung the filter out and replaced it with a clear. So at the touch of a button, standard infrared. Cool. Most cameras, well, some cameras can do this, the LT can do this, but it's a mechanical process. You have to pull the lens mount off and then remove the infrared cut filter using a screwdriver, and it takes, you know, it's a 15-minute change or a 10-minute change. And then replace it with a clear and then put the mount back on and put the lens back on. That was feedback from the Varicam 35 users who wanted infrared. So we try to make it quicker on the LT, and then we made it even quicker here. So just be conscious of, this is your warning, infrared. This is the place where it tells you you're in that mode. So in certain lighting situations, you may not be able to tell the difference. I mean, I don't know, that doesn't look too bad. Oh, that's better. So in certain situations, you may not see that you're in that mode. Unless you're specifically doing this, I wouldn't put infrared on a hotkey. Bury that back in the menus. Unless you're specifically shooting infrared a lot on a hotkey because you're going shot. But yeah, make sure it's not in infrared because in certain lighting situations, you may not see it. Battery types, there's 3 different types. We've got 59s and 89s here right now. The 118s are ridiculous capacity-wise. So, but most of these batteries actually take less time to charge than they do to run down. So ideally, you'll never be, you know, running out of batteries. We do have the dual bay battery chargers, which are really nice. So they're really fast charging. And again, it's the same batteries you've used on, you know, DVX and UX and everything else we've got. So a lot of runtime. And again, you can add, if you want different options for additional accessories, you can add P-taps and, you know, P-tap hub and then go that way. Or Anton Bauer batteries, you know, the one of these. A couple of days probably. It's ridiculous. So yeah, you got a lot of options. A few things we added: Cyan View and a Swedish company called Scarhodge have recently come up with 2 paint box adapters that allow us to do EVA1 live. So taking multiple levers and essentially put them in a broadcast style setup. So paint control, iris, and you actually see the paint box down here. So it allows us full paint control. So we've essentially turned our handheld compact cinema camera into a broadcast body. So it may be really useful for situations where you're in nightclubs, for example, and you don't necessarily need full studio style cameras. You've got the option of using small compact EVAs and a low cost paint box. It's a different function. Paint boxes now, Cyan View and Scar Hodge. I think that's the Scar Hodge. I got it right? Yeah. Optional viewfinders, again, LCD panels aren't for everybody. You can use the Varicam viewfinder if you want. It's a $5,000 unit. It's actually as much as the body, but it will work. This is a gorgeous, gorgeous finder, the VCF20. You've got the Graticals. There's two kinds of Graticals. One has an inbuilt Canon battery, so you don't require additional power. The one I've got here is the Gratical that actually has the 12 pin. We're actually running that through PTAP option, but there's a number of different options out there if you want to go down that road. And of course, we've got HDMI or SDI outputs, so you can run various different kinds of onboard monitors or recorders. Lots of glass options, PL mount if you need to do it. We do recommend support brackets if you're using anything heavier than the prime. Wooden Camera have done the PL mount, which is a full EF removal and then replace it with a PL. Takes 25 minutes if you got some shop experience. We do recommend it not being done in the field. But anything heavier than a good sized prime does require support. Please use support brackets. It's a really nice option. And it's, I think, Wooden Camera, they price it $500. I think there's an option for 900 fitted. If you want to go in there with screws, please make sure you don't drop screws on the sensor. That has happened. And of course, Panasonic don't necessarily make a ton of third-party accessories, brackets and handheld rigs and all that good stuff. We've outsourced our models to everyone from Arri to Zagudo, Wooden Camera and Shape and Focus and Telta. Some super cost-effective options, some really, really expensive options. If you want a base plate that costs more than 3 EVAs, you can go buy an Arri version, but it's the most gloriously made base plate you're ever going to use. So, ton of third-party options out there for accessories. As I mentioned before, we almost killed these cameras, or almost killed me. -5 in Iceland to 117 in Mojave Desert. We've got really, really good over the years for making studio cameras and P2 handhelds and Varicams at heat exhaustion. The heat exactly from here exhausts over the back of the battery, so it's nowhere near any mount or any mic at that point. So even with your ear up to it, I can't hear the fan running. Our heat exhaustion is excellent. We don't have cameras break down due to heat. More information on our website. You can come and dig around. There's menu simulators that we've done for the Varicams and across the board. Apps, free apps on the website, and that's it. I'm done here. Come play with cameras, please. Thank you.